Hi, my name is Bart. I'm a former Marine Corps aviator who flew over 1,100 combat missions during the Vietnam War. I'm here to share a few stories and lessons relating to the importance of character traits, character strengths, and weaknesses, and how they've played in my life. By the way, you might want to have a pen and paper handy just in case I cover something that you want to recall after we're finished. Here's a summary of what I've done with my life. In school, early on in the 7th grade, I met with failure at the beginning of the school year. We had to take a fitness test that included push-ups, chin-ups, and sit-ups. I was okay with the push-ups and the sit-ups, but not so with the pull-ups. And as the teacher lifted me up to the bar, I looked out at my 30 or so classmates and just hung there. I couldn't even begin to do a chin-up. Finally, I dropped off, my head down, and in total embarrassment, walked to the other end of the room. I discovered a character trait at that time, maybe two, that have been important to me. First, a 9th grader who was only an acquaintance had noticed my trouble and said he'd help get me better at that, doing chin-ups. His offer to work with me, an example of teamwork, really boosted my spirits. And the second quality was perseverance, which kept me going when the progress was slow over the next several months. The result in the short term was my passing the fitness test at the end of the semester. In the long term, when I was a new Marine Corps officer, I maxed the chin-up portion of the fitness test, doing 20. Stepping back a bit, you might wonder why I decided to go to the Naval Academy at Annapolis, Maryland. Well, it wasn't because of the academics. I'd been accepted at a top Ivy League school and could have studied international relations and history and the like. And also I could have joined ROTC if I wanted to. And it wasn't because Annapolis had one of the top 3 STEM programs in the country. It was because I thought the Naval Academy was the biggest challenge mentally, physically, and academically. And I did face a real challenge the first semester of my plebe or freshman year. I was failing chemistry. In fact, I had given up on it. I don't think I'd mentioned this to my parents, but they quickly found out when I came home for a Christmas vacation. They hired a chemistry teacher from my old high school, and for 2 hours every day, we hit the chemistry book hard. And I came back every evening while my buddies were skiing or skating or partying, and again, hit the books. But the work paid off when I took that final exam in January. I got a B. What a great feeling to work my way through that test and actually know what I was doing. And while I'm not going to advise you to take a subject you know is going to be hard for you, I did find that there is a great sense of satisfaction when you do that and demonstrate to yourself that you can do it. The character traits that came into play in that situation were self-regulation or self-discipline, love of learning, and hope. The latter, hope, was really great as I worked my way through that test. I should add another real plus of going to the Naval Academy was that I would never have won over the woman who eventually married me if I hadn't been wearing a Navy uniform. As a former Marine pilot who spent 3 years flying combat missions, I've lost too many friends. As I think back on those days and visualize their young faces and how we all were back then. I remember the roar of the engine, the whine of the transmission, the pounding of the machine guns, and a largely unseen enemy. I remember the sweltering heat and humidity, the unlighted landing zones, the crack of the passing bullets, and the fear which we all had. I remember these men as we were back then because I can give them no higher honor than to put into practice the best of the character traits that they showed me. Courage, hope, leadership, and love for our country. The motto of the Travis Manion Foundation is, if not me, then who? That's the question I had to ask myself in Vietnam one evening. I'd been suffering ear problems. They were aggravated by the changes in altitude that were common when flying our missions. I was scheduled for night medevac duty. These were the most dangerous missions we flew. The night environment, an unknown landing zone, an enemy seen only by the trail of their tracer bullets, all made for a tough situation. And my ears were hurting. But I couldn't see asking one of my buddies to take my place. What if he were shot down, maybe captured? It was an if not me, then who situation. So at 6 p.m., I showed up for duty. We only launched once that night, and overcast at 1,000 feet minimized the altitude change, and we completed our mission rescuing a wounded Marine. A short time later, I had to deal with an even more challenging situation on a stormy, dark night in mid-December 1967. The call came to my squadron to fly 2 helicopters to the Marine outpost at Quai San, the scene of what would soon be some of the heaviest fighting of the war. I was one of only 2 aircraft commanders who qualified to fly that night. Thus, despite the fact that I was the most junior aircraft commander in the squadron, our commanding officer had no choice but to send me on what was expected to be a long and difficult mission. The weather was bad and I was nervous as I climbed into the cockpit. I was trying to hold to this truth in the following statement. Quote, whatever it is your duty to do, you can do without harm to yourself, unquote. We took off about 9 p.m. and I kept loose formation on the lead helicopter by keeping in sight of his rotating red tail light. The flight was uneventful until we climbed into the clouds. It became increasingly difficult to keep that red tail light in view. How well I remember that light gradually disappearing in the clouds and darkness and stillness. The radios were silent, and blackness seemed to close in on me as fear overwhelmed the confidence I had in my personal skills as an aviator. I suffered vertigo, and as I confusedly watched the airspeed drop towards 0, I came within a hairbreadth of giving up and resigning myself and my crew to crashing into the mountains below. Instead, what I gave up was a struggle to fight my way out of the situation with human skills alone. As this happened, it was as though the letters LOVE were written across the cockpit window, lighting up the cockpit and driving away the fear and darkness. This was love with a capital L, which is often used as a synonym for God in the Bible. With a wonderful sense of confidence and protection, I took prompt action to get to the aircraft and to get the aircraft back into a safe flying condition. and proceeded with the flight for another 1.5 hours, including an instrument approach to the Khe Sanh airstrip. The field had shut down all lighting due to fear of an enemy attack, and the tower appreciated our effort, but said to return the next day. Not once was fear able to crack the protective shield of love that I felt enveloping us. If you have access to the list of character traits that I've been talking about, you'll see that spirituality is one of them. It certainly came into play that night and many other times during my 13 months in Vietnam.